All right, here we are on the desktop. And again, we're going to be painting just the mushroom part of this piece, utilizing our masking fluid in order to preserve these white areas. So I have a smaller version drawn out here. I have my palette, which needs to be cleaned out because we're going to be using very different colors. So you can see here I have a sketch drawn out with all of the little white specks on it, just so you can see them. Now, when I did this on this piece, how I transferred and put the masking fluid on here is I used this image and I put the masking fluid on directly without drawing anything. So I just went and drew my white shapes with the masking fluid. We drew them out here. That's totally fine as our guide. But I do want to lighten this up quite a bit, like as much as it'll possibly go, but being able to still see kind of where my marks are. And I'm even going to have my masking fluid just inside the pencil line. But I want to get that pencil line as light as possible, especially on the white side of the mushroom. That's the hard part with this. When you're painting something white, you really want to lighten your pencil lines as much as possible because you don't want pencil lines to interfere with the interaction of color and highlight or lightness, which is what is projecting the shape, not a pencil line. You don't need a line. Okay, I hope that made sense. So I have this teeny tiny brush here, and this is not a usual watercolor brush that I use, and I've actually applied a tiny bit of dish soap. So I just have Palmolive is what I have in my house. I know lots of people have all different kinds. I don't use it regularly. I have a dishwasher, but I use it for certain things. And you know, whatever name brand you have, or even whatever you got in your house should work. And I just took a little bit on my fingers and applied it to the bristles, and that preserves the bristles. It will wash off with water, but it will preserve it from getting too gunked up by this stuff. Otherwise your brush will be ruined before you even finish. Now what I always struggle with my masking fluid is actually getting it open, because glue gets into the grooves, or part of it gets into the grooves and dries, and then it's a push down and twist. And I always seem to, like not be able to get mine, oh, there we go, off. So I would recommend not putting your masking fluid in the cap. Don't put it in the cap, because then you get this buildup in the cap and it makes it really hard to get open the next time. So I have this tiny little measuring cup. I have like 100 of these not stupid things, but these things from when my kids were little and they no longer take liquid medicine because they're old now. They can swallow pills just fine, but for some reason I still have a ton of these in my medicine cabinet. So I'm using one of these as a little tiny cup for my masking fluid. Okay, not to be confused with medicine, don't take it. So I'm just gonna dip my brush in my masking fluid, and it's as simple as applying a dollop or a gob of this, and I'm going to zoom in a moment so you can see up close. You do want it to be thick enough. You don't want to put on an ultra thin layer, because then it's actually kind of hard to get it off. But you do want to work relatively quickly, and when you're using a small brush you will have to reload it often. Because it's not really, you know, again, it's a glue. We want it to stay wet. We don't want it to dry out on the brush. That dish soap will help. And you can definitely just look at a reference photo and put these dots on. They're all different shapes and sizes. They go off the edges. We're going to give them more shape and form later. Here, let me zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see what I'm doing. And it's like a yellowish color. You can get other kinds that are like, they go on blue. I have one that goes on blue, and I can already see it's getting like a little gunky. I'm just gonna take some water and pull that off. It goes on blue and then it dries clear, like ceiling paint. If you've ever painted your ceiling and you use like the purple paint so you can actually see where you've painted your white on your ceiling. But it dries clear. It dries like a lighter color. So the ones that are really important on the mushroom are the ones that go along the top. So I know I'm really zoomed in here. But these that break the line of the mushroom cap, that's what really gives things some three-dimensionality in this. So let's get all of these in. Like TikTok songs in my head right now. Almost done. And then the other part I'm going to do, I didn't draw out at all, but we have, if you look at here on this one, we have this like line of like really tiny ones. And even on here, it's actually different on the image. See how tiny and like sporadic they are? I'm going to try to recreate that with this brush, like a little more naturally. I'm just going to like wiggle my way through here and hope for the best, making some of them bigger and some of them smaller and some of it just like rough squiggles. So I didn't draw any of this out. I'm just going for it. It's hard with masking fluid to like, it is good for small spaces, but it also has its limits too. It can only get so small that it's like thick enough, but like not just a big blob, but will still come off when you... All right, so we're gonna give that a try. And actually there are some on here, I did not do this on my original painting, that actually come off the bottom here. I'm gonna add those in. So I didn't do that in the Studio Crew Classroom one. At least I don't think I did. All right, so that's all I'm going to do on this one. I did use some of this on other areas of the painting in the grass to leave some highlights, but we are not going to paint the grass on this one. We're just going to concentrate on the mushroom. You can definitely add grass to yours if you want, or again, go into the Studio Crew for that step-by-step, but you can definitely add in your background and your grasses. Okay. So the next thing you want to do with this is get it right back in the jar. Dump mine right back in. And then I wipe out my cup. So I take the cup and a paper towel and I wipe it out. I try not to pour any of this down the sink because it's glue and it might harden, and I have a well or a septic, so I don't want this in my septic tank. There we go. All clean, and put your cap right back on. Rinse and clean your brush off so that you can use it again in the future. But I wouldn't encourage you using any expensive brushes for this. So this is an Artlicious size 0. So this is a craft brush I got from somewhere. It's still a good craft brush. It's got a nice little point and tip on it, but I'm not going to spend a lot of money on anything I am putting in masking fluid, even though I'll do my best to protect the brush so I can use it multiple times, but eventually it will get worn down by the masking fluid. All right, so now you have to let it completely dry, walk away from it, go get a cup of tea or coffee, take the dog for a walk, whatever, throw in a load of laundry, fold some towels, garden, whatever it is you want to do. You have to let it dry completely. They will be completely matte when you come back. They won't have any glossy sheen on them, and they shouldn't really be tacky at all. All right, so let them dry and we'll come back and finish this piece. All right, we are back and our masking fluid is completely dry. It is still a little tacky in the sense that it feels kind of rubbery, but it's not like sticking to my fingers in any way. So that's really important to let it dry completely. So for the rest of our mushroom, we are going to be painting in the red of the red cap and also the grays and browns of the base. So I'm going to start with the red cap and let that dry. So with this, we are going to use Alizarin Crimson. We're going to bring that out and we're going to paint this in a couple of layers. So we're going to go from lightest to darkest to really increase our tonal range in the cap of the mushroom to create some three-dimensionality. So in the image, when I'm looking very closely at it, there's some areas that aren't white but are lighter in highlights. I don't know if you can see this in black and white. Sometimes it's easier to see things in black and white, but do you see this band that kind of runs through the middle here? Now, I didn't draw mine exactly like that, but I'm going to recreate some of this kind of lighter color by putting on a light wash first. So I'm just going to put on a light wash of our Alizarin Crimson right around the whole cap. And then when I put my second wash on in a darker color, we are going to leave some of that area out. And we're just going to let it be the very, very light red. From the color photo that you see if you're in the studio crew, you will see the reference photo itself, and that you'll be able to see the very specific areas. That are lighter in the color, and you'll be able to see that it's a light, pale kind of purpley pinkish color actually. And then this side of the mushroom is the darkest. So I'm just going to add wet on wet. While this is still very wet, I am just going to add this side is much darker and the underside is much darker. So this is going to dry a lot lighter as it dries. But I'm just going to put on this layer while it's wet, wet on wet. But I'm going to avoid this whole center area because I'm going to do some extra work there. Just going to blend it out. All right, so there's the top for now. This is kind of layer 1/1.5, because we did this piece here. And now we're going to let that dry and we're going to focus on our bottom part of our mushroom here. All right, so with that, we want to make a light gray color, but it's going to have some tawniness to it, some brownish. So this area is going to be very white, and then in the shadow, it's going to have some darker gray and brown colors. So I'm going to take some Paynes Grey out, and then I'm also going to take out a little of my primary colors. So I'm going to use magenta, a little phthalo blue, we're going to make a purple, and then a little Diarylide Yellow. All right, so we've made this nice, lovely light brown color here. And I can use these in combination with each other. I can mix a little Paynes Grey into this to create this very earthy but very light and subtle color of the stalk of the mushroom. So I'm going to take my Paynes Grey, I'm going to put that on this section and blend it out. And now all the way over to the right side, it's very light. This casts a nice shadow, but in the picture you can see it's got a very light highlight here in the grass. Some light is spilling through. So just the same way that the light is coming this way on the top of the mushroom, some light is spilling through. And this area is very dark and gray right underneath, but that area is a little bit lighter. Just putting some of that on, and then I'm going to take some of my browns and wet on wet, just drop a few of them in there. And we're going to let that dry, and again we're going to add another layer on here to pull apart the contrast in this area. So we're leaving this light, but not completely white, and making this shadow even darker and a little bit more prominent. This will pop out when you add a background. So you could just add a plain wash background, and maybe we'll do that here. We get a lot more in detail into the background and the grass in that more detailed video. But I really want to show you this masking fluid and how this is going to kind of transform this piece. So let's let this dry, put on our second layer, and then take off our masking fluid and finish up with final touches. All right, we're back and it is dry. Let's add our second layer. And now you can keep going and add as many layers and really lots of depth and dimension to this and get really specific, but we're just gonna do 2 layers and then take off this masking fluid. So I've got Alizarin Crimson pretty well saturated. I'm gonna start over on this side, and isn't it so lovely how I don't have to work around any of those little white spots? I am just painting right over them as if they weren't there, and they are gonna be preserved as white. It's gonna be fantastic. Now, as I start to blend over this way, I am going to leave some highlights that are going to be even lighter in here. So you can see it kind of worked around them. I made some bigger swaths of area around some of my other little white dots. And I'm gonna leave those the lightest red. Now the whole bottom under this cap here is quite dark. I guess the trick is just blending it out in a way that you're leaving these whiter, lighter areas, but you're blending them in a way so it's not like a harsh, harsh line. All right, and now I'm going to even add a little Paynes Grey to my red for the underside, because this part gets super dark under here and on this left side here. Did I say right side? I meant left side. All right, it looks a little dramatic right now. We're going to blend it out. All right, now I have a nice clean brush, and I'm gonna come into these areas and just add some water, just a tiny bit. And I'm gonna dampen these areas just so they blend ever so slightly. This side here is a little too light for me. I don't want it to be dark, dark, dark like this, but I want it to be a little bit more red. I introduce a little bit more red because I want this section to almost pop out a little bit. There we go. And you'll see that when these are yellowish now, our little dots here all over the mushroom, they're yellowish and they're flat. We're gonna cure that later on. When we peel them off, you're gonna see that bright white, and you're also we're gonna add shadows, which really help create that sense of them coming off the surface. All right, so let's add one more layer to our stem here as well. It's a lovely soft gray, but we're gonna give it a little drama. So back to my Paynes Grey and my brown. So brown, you can just make with your primary colors, a little yellow, a little magenta, and a little phthalo blue. Ooh, that was a lot of phthalo blue. That's all right though, because we're just gonna add some more of the other two until we get closer to brown. So it's gonna be more yellow and more magenta, which create orange, and brown is really just a dark orange. When I really started to think about it that way, after a long time of mixing colors, I really started to get it. Like, oh, I know how to make orange, and now I just have to like desaturate it a little bit and make it a little darker. All right, so we have our gray, we have our brown. I'm going to use a combination of both of these on the shadow side. I'm not gonna, I am gonna blend it out, but I'm gonna be a little more subtle this time. I really want this shadow to be a little more dramatic. I mean, that's a little dramatic. Introduce some gray up here. And just gonna dab off my brush. I've got a lot of water on here. I'm just gonna pull some of that off. And now with just a little water, I'm going to start to soften this edge here. And bring it all the way down. And it looks really dramatic. It's gonna dry much lighter when it's completely dry. I mean, we want it to be a little dramatic. We want it to have some contrast and some depth. We have a nice soft transition here where it gets much lighter, but it's soft. It's not like a sharp line. Sometimes your shadows are gonna make a sharp line, sometimes they're not. All right, so let this completely dry, and then we will get to the best part, taking off the masking fluid and creating that nice three-dimensional. I'll show you the other one on here. So taking off, we're gonna get these bright white pops, and then we add shadows underneath, and it's gonna be beautiful. Okay. Okay, we're back, and this held up its vibrancy quite a bit without a third layer, so I'm really happy with that. You do have to make sure everything is completely dry and cooled down for this stage. So cool down if you use a heat tool or anything like that. Make sure everything is nice and cool. What I've found to be a really helpful tool in removing masking fluid. So I have a love-hate relationship with masking fluid. For a long time, it was just a hate-hate relationship. I struggled with it so much. And one of the reasons I struggled with it was because I was using my finger to remove it. And using a rubber eraser, magic eraser, like this type of white eraser, works really well. And the reason, I think, I am speculating here, I don't have a scientific entry or journal to back this up, but what I'm observing is that the rubber on here is able to grab onto the rubber of here much better than my finger would. So a lot of times I was just rubbing and rubbing, and I'm actually rubbing all the paper around it too while I'm rubbing this off, and I'm damaging the paper. Where this, I'm just using it on the masking fluid itself, and it's able to grip it quite nicely, and I'm able to rub those right off. So let me zoom in a little bit to show you up close kind of what I'm doing here. And they come off. Now this is a little tedious, yes, because you have to do each one individually, but you want to protect your piece, and I promise you, you will love it in the end. But using this has been game-changing. So I'm gonna zoom in and change the angle a little bit. So now you can really see what I'm doing. Let me flip it close. So you can see I'm just rubbing it on this part. Oh, this one's thin. Okay, so one of the problems you can get if you put it on too thin, it's hard to get it off like in one roll. I had to work at this one a little bit harder, but it definitely still came off. That would have been like almost impossible just using my finger. I don't know if it's because my fingers are like extra oily, not oily enough. I don't know. But a lot of people just use their finger. All right, so this is the area where there's a lot of thinness to these. I'm gonna do my best to kind of stick, but these are really tiny. So I'm hitting the paper a little bit, but I'm trying to be gentle. Firm but gentle. So not like scrubbing an area, but you do have to be a little firm. And when I scrape it away like this, I'm just gently running my hand over it just to get away the debris. All right, I'm going to speed this up for the rest of the video and take the rest of this off, and then we will get into what we're going to do after this. So how we're going to upgrade these to be more than just flat white bits on our mushroom cap. All right, here we are with all of our masking fluid removed, and now we're going to create some 3 dimensions to these little flat white dots right now. So they look very flat on the mushroom cap. So one observation I made, that because I didn't do a background color at all in these, it's just white. These that kind of pop off the page or off the mushroom, they're just going into white nothingness. Now, if I put a color back there before I took off the masking fluid, you would see the full outline or shape of that. We're going to address that a little bit later. This one down here where I did the ones that are hanging off, you can see like one little piece of one right here. Because again, it was white on white, I rubbed it away and there's nothing there to show you the shape of the white. That's fine. These I'm going to ignore and just move on. Made a mistake. These I am going to show you just how to subtly kind of give them an outline without like outlining them. All right. So for our little dots, the light is coming this way, so they are going to cast shadows. So let me show you on here. All of these, they have a very tiny little shadow underneath, but it makes all the difference. So darkest on the mushroom cap itself, and then just on the side or on the underneath, you can see on each of them, they have a gray little something that just helps them pop. So on the mushroom cap, I'm going to use a combination of Paynes Grey and Alizarin Crimson to make a very dark, let me zoom out here so you can see my palette. There we go. I don't want to zoom out too far because I want you to be able to see what I'm actually doing. But so this is a combination of Paynes Grey and Alizarin Crimson. And then we're just going to have straight Paynes Grey over here. So I'm going to clean this well out because I want this to be completely, have no influence of red in it really, this one. And it's very light. Look how subtle it is. Maybe I'll make it a little bit darker just so we can see it. Okay, so I'm going to start with the Alizarin Crimson. Now the light is coming this way, so all my shadows are going to be pretty much down and on this side. And I'm going to go over all of these kind of bigger areas first, or the flat dots all along. We'll address this area down here in a minute. So it's not rocket science. You don't want them to all be perfect or the same. You're not just doing a little line. Some of them are going to be, you know, reminiscent of the shape above. So this one's longer, so it's going to have a slightly longer shadow. This one's taller and chunkier. And then when you get into the lighter areas, you're also going to water this down a little and make it a little bit lighter. It doesn't need to be as dark as the rest. And that just makes it a little more natural. All right, so make sure you get them all. There we go. And you can always go back and add on another layer later if you need to if you don't make them dark enough, you need them to be a little darker after they dry. You can't make them lighter, unfortunately, although you can make the rest of your mushroom darker. But then you're going to have to be painting around all of this stuff. All right. Oh, I missed one up here. This one's just going to get a little line because you're not going to see the rest. It's tucked behind that other one. Okay. And then I'm going to take my Paynes Grey, and then on some of them, just on the side with the shadow, I'm just giving it a little touch of shadow on a section of it. So it looks like it's like folded around. So the light is hitting this top side, but if this had some shape and form, it wasn't just a flat disc, and it was curved or had a little chunkiness to it, that chunkiness on the side or angle would be slightly darker. So the same for these on top. These on top, the light's coming this way. So if I use this gray and kind of go up into where they go above the line of the mushroom, where we can't actually see the white, but now I've given them shape just by outlining that one side. And then as we get closer in here, the shadows change a little bit. They're a little more down. They're a little lighter. All right. All right, I think we have all of those pieces. We're gonna go down in here now with some of our dark red, and this is gonna be a little messier because everything's kind of connected. So I'm just gonna go along the bottom and kind of do my best just to make it make sense. So going along the edge and just skipping some spots, even in between here, like maybe putting a little bit on the side. This could be casting a shadow on this piece itself, but just remembering where your light is coming from. And what that does to a shape. So that looks great. You don't have to be too dramatic with it because these are flatter. It's like, I don't know what I did with my sheet, but and we're gonna do the same thing with the gray. I'm just gonna go through and kind of keep everything to the left side. But look at shapes like this shape kind of goes around, and it's gonna be on both this side and in this hook. All right, there we go. So easy peasy, you don't have to make it more difficult. You can see this creates a lot of drama, a lot of pop. You could go back and revisit this shadow under here, give it a little more texture and depth if you wanted to. Some more texture would be a lot of fun. We have some brown in here. This is pretty dry. So I could take my brown, contrasting color, and just wet on dry. Yeah, give that a little texture under there because often they are not perfectly smooth. These mushroom stems, they have dirt on them and little stringy bits. So there we have it. I hope that was helpful. For those of you who have seen my past videos where I swear against masking fluid, I hope you can accept my ability to learn and grow and find new tools that can help me appreciate certain watercolor tools that maybe I didn't love before. So always trying something new or going back to something you've tried before that you didn't like and realizing you have new skills and tools now that maybe you will like it. All right, I'm Shayna Cersei. Thank you so much for painting with me. I hope you found this helpful. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment. I always appreciate comments. Become a studio crew member to get even more in-depth or just more tutorials and outlines, as well as check out the description for my links to my social media accounts and to supplies and materials. So all the things that I use in these videos are on a daily basis. You'll be able to find in there. All right, thanks so much, everybody. Happy painting.